Good
afternoon, everybody. I hear my voice.
Morning.
Good afternoon, Rabbi.
Good afternoon, everybody. Somebody's watching the Facebook video. I know that one. 1 second.
We have to take it very seriously. Next year we won't have this distance between us.
All right, let me open up our source sheet.
Need to help assist the ship back to its port of origin.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody.
How things occurred, because very clearly.
All right. Good afternoon. And shkoyach to all of you for being so ready for Yom Tov that you could take this time off on Erev Chag in order to learn together. I wish I was that ready, but it's nice to do so. And it's nice, this is almost our last opportunity to learn in person this Pesach. Before we know it, Pesach will be over and we'll be moving on. And our topic today is 2 misconceptions about Sfirat HaOmer. Now, until this morning, the title of this shiur was 3 misconceptions about Sfirat HaOmer. However, it was just too long, and I felt I was sacrificing too much by squeezing the 3 topics into the 1 session. So instead, we're going to be looking at just 2 misconceptions about Sfirat HaOmer. And my hope is that alongside dealing with these misconceptions, we're going to develop an understanding of Sfirat HaOmer from a halachic perspective and where the priorities lie. Our starting point is the pasuk in the Torah. It says in source number 1, "Usfartem lachem imocharat haShabbat." You should count for yourselves from the day after Shabbat, and we know that that means the day after Pesach. Miyom aviachem et Omer hatnufar, from the day on which you bring the wave Omer offering, then Sheva Shabbatot mimot tihiena, you should count for 7 complete weeks. And this is a well-known pasuk from the passage or song which is recited prior to counting the Omer. Hineni muchanim zuman l'kayem mitzvat aseh. I am ready and prepared to perform a positive mitzvah of the Torah, kamo shekatuv b'Torah, as it says in the Torah, usfartem lachem imocharat haShabbat, etc. The words of this pasuk are well known from that Hineni. Similarly, in Dvarim, we're told in source number 2, Shiva Shavuot tispor lach, you should count 7 weeks. So, we have to count the weeks. Me'achel chermesh bakama tacher ispar Shiva Shavuot, from the time the sickle hits the standing corn, you count for 7 weeks. In the Gemara in source number 3, there is a difference of opinions as to how one should count. Gufa, there we say, Amar Abaya, Abaya says, mitzvah lemimne yomi or mitzvah lemimne shvui. According to Abaya, we need to count both the days and the weeks. That's because the Torah tells us both about counting 7 weeks and counting the days. However, on the other hand, Rabbanan Devei Rav Ashi Manu Yami Manu Shvui, sorry, on the same time side, on Rav Ashi's side, that's what they did. However, on the other side, Ameimar Mani Yomi V'lo Mani Shvui. Ameimar would only count the days and not count the weeks. Why would Ameimar not count the Omer in the way that the Torah tells us to?
Be able
Amar,
he
said, 1 second, he said, Zecher lemikdash, who he said, when we count the Omer today, we are not fulfilling the biblical commandment of counting the Omer, which you count from when you bring the wave Omer offering, because we don't bring the actual Omer offering today. So he says, Zeicher lemikdashu. Our counting nowadays is just to remember the way things were at the time of the Beit HaMikdash. And therefore, Ameimar would take this middle position. He would count the days, but not count the weeks. And this position of Ameimar raises the question, the key question, which is, what is the status of counting the Omer today? Today, when we count the Omer, we did it last night, and we're going to do it again tonight. And if you didn't do it last night, you can count it now. When we count the Omer in our times, are we fulfilling a biblical mitzvah? Or is it something that we're now doing rabbinically just to remember the way things were when we had a Beit Mikdash? Rashi, in source number 4, explains Ameima's opinion. And he said, Ameima mani yomi v'lo shvui, he would count just the days and not the weeks. Why? Amar hai minyana dehashta lav chovahi, he said that our counting nowadays is not a biblical obligation. Dehaleka omer, because we're not actually bringing the omer offering. Similarly in Tosfot, source number 5, Zeichel HaMikdashi, Tosfot gives a practical difference, because it's always important to give practical differences. Is it rabbinic? Is it biblical? What difference does it make?
Being able to occur.
It's a
And
very
all of that is at
practical
risk.
question.
Is all airlines are under pressure.
Mr. Slonim, I'm muting you, but if you have just one window open at a time, then it will be easier to hear me. I think you're struggling to hear me there. All right. Source number 5. Tosfot gives a practical explanation, and he says, "Nir'eh b'safek chashecha yachol levarech." You can count the Omer if you're unsure if it's nighttime or not. The Omer needs to be counted at nighttime. Can you count after Shkia? Can you count in that twilight zone between day or night? Now, normally when it comes to Torah mitzvot, we wait until it's definitely nighttime. However, Tosfot say that even if you're not sure it's definitely night yet, you can still make a bracha. And this is very relevant when shuls daven together during the Omer and it's not yet dark outside, and a shul may want to count the Omer as a community, even though it's light outside, to make sure people don't forget. Tosfot say you can do that with a bracha. You don't have to wait until it's definitely nighttime. Why not? Because nowadays our counting of the Omer is derabanan, it is rabbinic. And therefore, seeing as nowadays when we count the Omer, it's rabbinic, it means that in a case of doubt, such as if you're not sure if it's nighttime yet, we can be lenient. So Tosfot is clearly of the opinion that the Omer nowadays is rabbinic. Rambam, on the other hand, disagrees in source number 6. Rambam tells us in Hilchot Midin Umusafim, Mitzvat aseh lispor sheva Shabbatot tmimot. It is a positive mitzvah in the Torah to count 7 complete weeks. Miyom hava'at Omer, from the day on which the Omer is brought, Shneimar, as it says, Usfartem lachem imacharat Shabbat sheva Shabbatot, the pasuk which we saw in source number 1. Umitzvah limnot hayamim im hashavuot. It is a mitzvah to count the days with the weeks. And then a couple of halachot later he says, who does this apply to? Mitzvah zo al kol ish mi Yisrael. This is a mitzvah for every Jewish man. V'chol makom v'chol zman. Rambam says explicitly, this mitzvah applies everywhere, at every time. It means not just in Israel, not just in Yerushalayim, not just in the Beit HaMikdash, b'chol makom, everywhere in the world. V'chol zman, it applies in every time, meaning, according to Rambam, when we count the Omer today, we are performing a biblical mitzvah. V'nashim v'avadim p'turim mimena, women and servants do not need to count the Omer. The question of women counting the Omer is an interesting one. If they want to, they certainly can do so with a bracha, but it is a positive time-bound mitzvah. So we have 2 views. According to Tosfot, counting the Omer nowadays is rabbinic. According to Rambam, it is biblical. The Beit Yosef in source number 7 says there is a clear majority. Quoting the Ran, who says, Rav ha-mefarshim maskimim, the majority of Mefarshim agree, nowadays that we don't bring the wave offering and we don't have a sacrifice. Eina ela midrabanan ba'alma. The consensus is that the Omer nowadays, the counting the Omer is midrabanan. And that also appears in the halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, source number 8. The Shulchan Aruch tells us, B'leil Sheni, on the second night of Pesach, Achar Tfilat Arvit, after davening Ma'ariv, Matchilin Nispara Omer, we start counting the Omer. If you forgot to count at the beginning of the night, you can count the whole night. It's a mitzvah on every individual to count for themselves. You need to count standing up, and to make a bracha first. You count the days and the weeks. But then critically in the next halakha, the Shulchan Aruch says, what happens if it was a cloudy day? So there are very dark clouds outside. You thought it was nighttime, and then the clouds passed, and you realize actually it wasn't night yet. And they made the bracha on Sfirat HaOmer. He says, you count again when it gets dark. However, that doesn't mean you do it with the bracha. Pay attention. Who waits for it to be definitely dark outside before counting the Omer? The people who are particular, the people who are very careful to follow all opinions. It is ra'ui, it is appropriate to do that. But note the Shulchan Aruch says it is appropriate to count after nightfall. That's what particular people do, but that doesn't mean that you have to, because the Shulchan Aruch believes, like the majority of Rishonim, as opposed to the Rambam, that counting the Omer nowadays is rabbinic and it is not biblical. As the Biur Halacha says in the name of the Shulchan Aruch, and then we'll ask our big question in source number 9, in Eidat HaRambam v'Chinuch. According to the Rambam and the Chinuch, it's no surprise the Chinuch was very influenced by the Rambam. Shunoheg min haTorah ata, that nowadays it is still biblical. Achein dat haTor v'Shulchan Aruch, but it is the view of the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch v'kama poskim, and numerous poskim, she'ein bizman hazeh ela zeicher lemikdash yekriv ha'omer. Nowadays, counting of the Omer is a zeicher lemikdash. It is remembering what they did in the Beit HaMikdash. It is rabbinic. It is not biblical. Which brings us to understanding the title of misconception number 1. What's misconception number 1? Hineni mochan umzuman lekayem mitzvat aseh. How can it be that prior to counting the Omer, many people say and sing, Hineni mochan umzuman, I am ready and prepared, lekayem mitzvat aseh, to fulfill a positive mitzvah in the Torah, kamo shekatuv b'Torah, as is written in the Torah, usfartem lachem b'mocharat haShabbat. How could you say you're fulfilling a positive mitzvah in the Torah? Where according to Tosfot, and according to most Rishonim, and according to the Torah, and according to the Shulchan Aruch, you are not fulfilling a mitzvah in the Torah. You're doing a zeicher lemikdash. Now, certain people who daven with a certain nusach or nuschaot would have many occasions where this hineni appears before doing different mitzvot. But for many of us, the only time we say hineni is before Sfirat HaOmer, but it's an inaccurate statement at first glance, and I think at second glance as well, because counting the Omer is rabbinic, it is not biblical. And more than that, it's possible that not only is it mistaken to say, I am about to fulfill a biblical mitzvah, perhaps it can ruin the mitzvah as well. Let's have a look at what it says in the Rambam on our second page. Although Rambam himself views it as being d'oraita. Rambam in source number 10 talks about the prohibition against adding onto what it says in the Torah and removing from what it says in the Torah. Rambam says, "Shelo lohosif al divrei Torah v'lo ligra mehen." You're not allowed to add on to what's written in the Torah, and you cannot detract from what's written in the Torah. Ketzad, what kind of case? He gives an example. Harei katuv b'Torah lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo. The Torah says on 3 occasions, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Mipi hashmuah lamdu, and we know from our tradition what the Torah means is shezeh katuv asay levashel v'lechol basar v'chalav. It's not just talking about one animal and its mother, it's talking about meat and milk in general. But which animals? Bein basar behema, whether it's a domesticated animal, bein basar chaya, or an undomesticated animal. So the Torah forbids eating meat and milk. Aval basar ha'of, when it comes to the flesh of poultry, mutar b'chalav min Torah, on a Torah level, you are allowed to eat chicken. So chicken is parav on a Torah level. Im yavo beit din v'yatir basar chayav v'chalav, if a beit din comes along and says you can have normal meat and milk, harei ze gorea, then they are removing from what it says in the Torah. However, the im yasor basara off, if a beit din comes along and says you're not allowed to have chicken and milk, the yomeshu bichlal hagdi, and they'll say that that's what the Torah meant when it said gdi, v'asur min Torah, and that biblically you can't have chicken, harei ze mosif, then you're adding to what's written in the Torah. You're not allowed to say that a rabbinic principle is biblical. You're not allowed to say that on a Torah level you can't have chicken with milk. What can you say? If you say that you know on a Torah level chicken is parov, but for numerous concerns, we are going to forbid it, and we explain why we're doing it. Because of those concerns, all forms of meat, including poultry, are forbidden. According to the Rambam, if you take a rabbinic principle and you call it a biblical principle, then you are doing the biblical prohibition of adding on to that which is written in the Torah. And that strengthens our question. How can so many people, before counting the Omer, say, Hineni muchanum zuman lekayem mitzvat aseh kamo shekatuv b'Torah, when that is clearly a false statement? You are not about to fulfill a Torah mitzvah as is written in the Torah. You're fulfilling a rabbinic mitzvah, zeicher mikdash, to remember the way things were in the mikdash. Source number 11, I brought you from the Klausenberger, Shut Divrei Yitziv, one approach to this question. And he says, V'zeh li yamim rabim shemin hagi, for a while, my personal practice has been l'daleg al tevot halalu, I just miss out those words. V'lo mara, what do I say? Hineni muchanim zuman lekayem mitzvat sfirat ha'omer, to fulfill the mitzvah of Sfirat HaOmer. He doesn't call it mitzvat aseh. He says, I'm just going to fulfill the mitzvah. And instead of saying, Kamo shekatuv b'Torah, the way that it's written in the Torah, he says, V'chatuv b'Torah, and it says in the Torah this and that. Why? Because indeed, counting the Omer nowadays is rabbinic according to most opinions. And I found that other people are doing it as well. There are a number of people who just don't say those words. Especially according to what the Rambam says, that included in the prohibition of adding on to what's written in the Torah is saying that something rabbinic is biblical. So the Shut Divrei Yitziv says, I just miss out of those words. And I know a number of people who just don't say those words, but it is a very common thing for people to say. So how can we justify it and to explain their behavior? He goes on to give a limud zchut. He says, maybe you can explain, benusach hanidpas, in explaining the formal published version of what needs to be said, lachush ladat hanirabufta shechiyuv dvar Torah. Maybe that's included in the Siddur to cover you according to those rabbis who say that it's biblical. Maybe you got it wrong the other way around. You see, either way you're in trouble. If it's rabbinic and you claim that it's biblical, that's forbidden. But if it's biblical and you think that it's rabbinic, you're also in trouble. So he says, maybe you're just hedging your bets and you're saying, I'm preparing to fulfill a Torah mitzvah, even though you may not actually be doing that. And he goes on to say, Uvikar hanusach efshar od, perhaps furthermore you can say, the mitzvat aseh shel sfirat ha'omer hainu mitzvat aseh d'Rabbanan. No. When you say, Henani muchanum zuman lekayem mitzvat aseh, you don't mean I'm about to fulfill a mitzvat aseh of the Torah. You mean I'm about to fulfill a mitzvat aseh d'Rabbanan. Uma shekatuv kamo shekatuv b'Torah, and when you say I'm about to do this as has been written in the Torah, Ritzono lomar, kamo shekatuv b'Torah ikar hamitzvah b'zman shebeit hamikdash kayam. I'm now ready to fulfill the mitzvah the way it was fulfilled when it was a mitzvah. ועכשיו זכר לכך, and I have to remember that I'm doing it now as well, ויש לו עיקר מהתורה, because it is sourced originally in the Torah. In other words, and this is what I personally do, I say, הנני מוכן מזומן לקיים מצוות עשה כמו שכתוב בתורה, with a full knowledge and awareness that I'm not about to fulfill a mitzvat aseh כמו שכתוב בתורה. But what do I have in my kavanah? My kavanah is, הנני מוכן ומזומן לקיים מצוות עשה כמו שכתוב בתורה. I'm ready and prepared to fulfill this in the best possible way. What does that mean? In the Beit HaMikdash, with a korban, and bringing the Omer offering. That's what I'm ready for. But I'm aware that nowadays, that is not what I am doing. Either way, this is a major, I believe, it is a major misconception about Sfirat HaOmer. If you ask most people, is Sfirat HaOmer d'oraita or d'Rabbanan nowadays, most people would believe they're filling a mitzvah from the Torah. But the clear consensus and halacha is that Sfirat HaOmer nowadays is d'Rabbanan. Practically speaking, it means that you can count the Omer at Bein Hashmashot. You can count the Omer if you are not sure if it is halachically nighttime outside, and we have to be wary of that misconception. The second misconception about Sfirat HaOmer, I believe, is far more dangerous. And that is the concept that it is very popular for people to think that you stop counting if you miss a day. There might even be somebody attending the shiur feeling a certain level of guilt, thinking, "Oi, I'm already out of the game. I've already forgotten a day, and why am I sitting through this?" And it's a real misconception that people think that if you miss a day, you're out the game entirely, because that is not the case. And we're going to see the basis behind that concept and the application of that concept in a few different areas as well. Our starting point is a machloket in the Rishonim between the Bahag and Tosfot. Tosfot, in source number 12, Tosfot in Menachot quotes the Bahag who he's going to disagree with. And he says, Od pasak behilchot gdolot. It says in the Bahag, if you missed out a day and you didn't count, velo safar koma, shuv eino sofer, you cannot continue counting. Why? Mishum debayat mimot. The Torah says you have to have 7 complete weeks. If you miss out a day, it's not complete. It's missing. Like numerous people have been telling me they've been doing puzzles over this Yom Tov, a way to get through isolation, 500-piece puzzles, 1,000-piece puzzles. And there's a common story I'm hearing of people doing an 1,000-piece puzzle where they reach the end and they realize that they've got 1 or 2 pieces missing, which is a tremendous frustration. And you think, what's the point of this entire puzzle if I've got 1 piece missing? According to the Bahag, the puzzle of Sfirat HaOmer requires every single piece. If you've got 1 day missing, it doesn't count and you cannot continue. But Tosfot responds and he says, V'tema gdolahu. That's incredibly astounding. V'lo yitachen, Tosfot say, it is impossible that that is the case, that you cannot count if you stopped counting 1 day of the Omer. The Rosh in source number 13 explains what is underlying their machloket. And he believes it's as follows. He says, Ve'ein nireh the kol laila v'laila mitzvah b'fnei atzmahi. The Ri is on the side of the Tosfot. He's one of the Baalei Tosfot. The Rosh explains as follows. We have 2 different approaches here. You have the approach of the Bahag that we have, the Ri doesn't think that every night is an independent mitzvah. Sorry, Ri is we on the side of the Bahag. You've got one approach. There's the approach which says that we have 1 continuous mitzvah, and therefore if you miss a piece along the way, you've lost the entire package deal. There's another view which is every single night is a mitzvah. What does that mean? Counting the 5th night is a mitzvah. If you did it, great. If you didn't, it's a shame. But you've still got a mitzvah to count on the 6th night, and you've got a mitzvah to count on the 7th night, and you've got a mitzvah to count on the 8th night as well. So according to the Rosh, the underlying conceptual machloket here is the mitzvah of counting the Omer a continuous mitzvah of 49 days or 49 individual units? If it's individual units, you can miss a puzzle piece, but still get the rest of the puzzle pieces. If it's a continuous sequence, then you are in trouble. What is the halacha? The Shulchan Aruch is clear with the halacha in source number 14. Shachach v'lo birech kol halayla. What happens if you forgot to count at night? Then yispar bayom b'lo bracha. On the very same day, you can count without a bracha. So you forgot to count on the 5th night, so you say during the daytime that today's the 5th day without a bracha, and you're still in the game to continue counting with a bracha. You haven't missed an entire day from beginning to end. The next case, Im shachach levarech be'echad mahayamim. What happened if you forgot an entire day? Bein yom rishon, bein mishar yamim, whether it's the first day or any other day. The halacha is sofer b'shar yamim belo bracha. You continue counting without a bracha. The halacha is like Tosfot. The halacha is, or it's a combination of Tosfot and Bahag, but you still have to continue counting. It's not true that if you forgot a night, you stop counting. It's simply not true. If you forgot a night, you continue counting without a bracha. It is true you don't make a bracha, but you still fulfill the mitzvah of counting. And this misconception is a very dangerous one. What it means is there are many members of Am Yisrael who miss out on performing many mitzvot because they think they're out the game. They think counting the Omer isn't for them because they forgot on the first night. And therefore they just don't count the other nights. But the halacha is that you must continue counting. Just you do so without a bracha. And we do so without a bracha we're tipping our hats towards the opinion of the Bahag, and according to some opinions you can't count with a bracha, but the bottom line is that you should continue counting however many nights you've missed. Even if it's the final night of the Omer and you haven't counted a single night until then, you should count that night without a bracha. It's a shame for so many people to miss out on so many mitzvot because they think they're out the game. So I want to make sure that's very clear. If you miss out at night time, you count at the day without a bracha, and then you can continue the next night with a bracha. If you miss an entire night and a day, you continue counting. There's never a reason to stop counting. You continue counting, but you do so without a bracha. What happens if you're not sure? Aval imhu mesupak. Im dileg yom echad v'lo siper, if you counted one night or not. So what happens if you're thinking to yourself, I really don't remember if I counted last night or not? Or in perhaps a more likely scenario, it's not just that you don't remember if you counted last night or not, you think, last night did I count the right night? So you did count, but maybe you counted the wrong night. And what if you're not sure if you've got it right? What happens in such a case? The Shulchan Aruch says, Yispor b'shar yamim bivracha. If you're not sure if you counted or not, you keep going with a bracha. Now, this is a fascinating concept. Normally speaking, we have a rule. Safek brachot lehakel. If you're unsure about a bracha, don't repeat that bracha. Just move on without a bracha. On this occasion, we're saying that if you're unsure if you counted, you continue with a bracha. Why would that be the case? We're going to see two explanations with a very practical difference emerging from those two explanations. Why do you continue counting if you're not sure if you got it right, if you're unsure if you counted? The Trumat Hadeshen explains in source 15. This is the question. The question is, Im safek le'echad, if one person is in doubt. Im safar laila achat or lo, if you counted on a certain night or not. What do you do from now on? Yispar bivracha or lav, do you count with a bracha or not? Because of course you continue counting, you always continue counting. The only question is, do you continue with a bracha or not? And the Trumat Hadeshen explains, tshuva, yir'eh de yispar bivracha mikan v'hala. He's of the opinion that you should continue counting with a bracha. And he says, even if you've waited an entire day until you've realized that you're unsure. Nevertheless, you continue counting with a bracha if you are unsure. Even though when you've definitely missed an entire day. Naginan kebahag. Even though if you definitely missed an entire day, we hold like the Bahag, which means you don't continue counting. Perish b'bracha, meaning you don't continue counting with a bracha. The below bracha, because if you're not making a bracha, what difference does it make? Just continue counting anyway. Or the Tosfot opposed to Tosfot. However, b'safek matzinu lemismach alayhu. If there's a safek, we hold like Tosfot. What's the Trumat Hadeshen saying? We have two views. We have Tosfot and we have the Bahag. According to the Bahag, if you miss a day, you can't count with a bracha. According to Tosfot, if you miss a day, you continue counting with a bracha. So, what he says is normally we hold like the Bahag. That's the way he explains the sugya. Normally, if you definitely forgot a day, you continue without a bracha. However, if you're unsure, then you can hold like Tosfot. Why would that be the case? The Pri Chadash in source number 16 explains about imhu misufak, if he is in doubt. He says, Afal gav the misufak who, even though you're unsure, you should in theory say count without a bracha. The Satei brachot lahakel, because if you're unsure about brachot, we are lenient. If Zion as appears earlier in the Shulchan Aruch. Nevertheless, mikol makom, Krakatav b'Trumat Hadeshen Siman Lamed Zayin, the Trumat Hadeshen wrote, the Afal gav de lo nagila b'vadai lo safam yom echad kisvarat ri, even though we don't hold like the ri, when you definitely missed out a day. The Safek matzina lemismach alei, we do hold like the Tosfot in a case of Safek. Why? He says in source 16, the key phrase, the Havele Sfeik Sfeika. If you're unsure if you counted the Omer or not, you don't have one Safek, you have a double Safek. It is a Sfeik Sfeika. Why is it a double Safek? Safek number one, Safek im dileg or lo, you are unsure if you missed a day or not. That's doubt number one. If you've only got one doubt, don't make the bracha. But here we've got a double doubt. You're not sure if you counted or not, or if you counted correctly or not. The im timse lomar dileg, even if you really did miss a day, efshar sheyeh halacha kari shelo hefsid hatzvira. There's another safek, which is what's the halacha in this case? Is the halacha to continue counting with a bracha or not? There's a safek in the mitziut, the safek in the reality of did you count or not, and there's a safek in the din, a safek in the halacha of what you do in this case. And it's the combination of two sfekot that you can continue counting with a bracha. That is what the Magen Avraham says to explain the Trumat Hadeshen. And therefore, if you're unsure if you've counted or not, you've got two doubts, if you counted or not, and what the halacha would be in the case you didn't count, and because you've got a double doubt, you can continue counting with a bracha. What the Ketav Sofer is going to say in source number 17 is similar, but significantly different. And we're going to see a practical difference which will arise as a result. The Ketav Sofer says in source number 17, V'ayin Pri Chadash, look at the Pri Chadash, Tama de'ika Sfeik Sfeika. He says the reason is because there's a Sfeik Sfeika. Shema Barech, number one, did you make the bracha or not? V'shema halacha de mavarech b'lav hachi b'shalei lot. Sorry, or should you make a bracha? And maybe the halacha is that either way you should continue counting with a bracha. Now the Ketav Sofer goes and he takes it onto a different level now. And now he says, V'hakol kevan derav haposkim spiralei de mavarech. What's going on here? It is because the weight of halachic opinion is on the side that says you continue counting with a bracha. Rak, however, the nagu lachmir kedat bahag. Our minhag is to be strict like the bahag. Nevertheless, kol sheyesh od tzad svara, tzad v'svara. All you need is another side to things, another logical argument to tip the balance. Samchin ala rovadeot, we go with the majority. Levarech b'shalei lailot, to breath on other nights. V'chein kitav Magen Avraham, and that's what the Magen Avraham means. Let me explain. If you're unsure if you counted or not, the first approach we saw was that you have a double doubt. You're not sure if you counted or not, and also there's a doubt what the halacha is. That's not what the Ketav Sofer says. What the Ketav Sofer says is, on the one hand, you have the weight of halachic opinion, which says you continue counting with a bracha, because each night is an independent mitzvah. That's the weight of halachic opinion. Now, under normal circumstances, there's this opinion of the Bahag, and we're machmir like the Bahag under normal circumstances. But all you need is anything to tip the balance in favor of the weight of halachic opinion, and we will throw aside the opinion of the Bahag and will let you continue counting. In this instance, what's tipping the balance in favor of the weight of halachic opinion? It's a safek. You're not sure if you counted or not. However, you don't have to have a double safek. Any consideration, valuable or valid consideration, can tip the weight of halachic balance. And this is the reason behind the following wonderful halacha. And I will allow you to unmute yourselves to answer this question, because I'm sure some of you know the answer to this question. Who is allowed to count the Omer with a bracha, even if they've definitely missed a night? There's somebody who's allowed to count the Omer with a bracha, even though they have definitely, not a doubt, they've definitely missed a night and a day. And the
Convert
answer
or
is,
bar mitzvah boy?
Ezra May says,
Convert, bar mitzvah boy.
So there are the two cases, a convert and a bar mitzvah boy. Ezra, it's wonderful to see you and to hear you as well. There are a number of opinions when it comes to a convert and a bar mitzvah boy, and this is one of the considerations when we discuss that case. So let's say somebody converted in the middle of the Omer, so they've missed out on the first few weeks. Or somebody became a bar mitzvah during the middle of the Omer, so they've missed out on that first period. Can they count even though they haven't had all the build-up? There are three different opinions, and certainly there's a body of opinion which says a convert or a bar mitzvah boy can count with a bracha, even though they have missed prior to that occasion. That's one of the opinions. Because there are three opinions. Number one is, if you've counted until now with a bracha, then you can continue with a bracha. It doesn't make sense that as a 12-year-old you've counted with a bracha, and then you turn bar mitzvah, and now that you've become a bar mitzvah, you go down a level in your religious practice. So if you've counted, you keep going. Opinion number two is, whatever happens, you keep going, whether you've missed or not. And opinion number three is that whatever happens, you don't make a bracha. Either way, according to one of those three opinions, yes, I'll take it for a convert and for a bar mitzvah boy. Who else is there who was Jewish and over the age of 13, already when Pesach commenced, who can continue counting with a bracha, even if they definitely missed a whole night and a day? If you don't know, I'm delighted. It means I can teach you something.
If you follow one of the earlier opinions, they say you don't need, you can say bracha even if you missed.
So if you're following that opinion, we generally don't follow that opinion. But there are occasions when we do. When do we follow that opinion? Not just a case of safek where you definitely missed it. The answer is the rabbi of the shul. The rabbi of the shul is allowed to count with a bracha, even if he missed definitely an entire night and a day. Let's have a look inside the Shevat HaLevi in source number 18 from Rav Vosner. Rav Manhig Be'ira. You have a rabbi who's the leader of his city. Sheshachach be'echad hayamim shel sfirat ha'omer lisvar ha'sfira, who forgot on one of the days of the Omer to count, because he didn't daven in shul, because the best way to remember to count the Omer is to daven in shul. If you're davening in shul every night, the shul counts, you count with the shul. It's easy to remember. But for whatever reason, he didn't count in shul one night, and he forgot to count. What should that rabbi do on the other nights? Because what happens is when the rabbi is in shul, it comes to Sfirat Omer, everybody goes quiet, they turn around and they look at the rabbi, and the rabbi counts on behalf of the community. But if the rabbi doesn't count, then it is bizayon, then it's a real disgrace and a huge embarrassment and humiliation, because everyone will know that he forgot one night. And kvod Torah. Where's the kavod for the Torah if the rabbi isn't able to count with a bracha? And therefore, Rav Vosner says, Banioti b'makom hadchak kazeh, in a difficult, pressing situation such as this one, אפשר לסמוך על דת הראשונים בסימן תפ"ט דכל יום מצווה בפני עצמה. on that occasion, you can rely on the halachic opinion that says that every day is an independent mitzvah. V'yispor b'shayamim b'bracha, that you can continue counting every day with a bracha. So we have the majority of halachic opinion which says you continue counting with a bracha. Normally, we're choishesh like the bahag. However, in this situation, we'll follow the majority opinion and allow him to save him that humiliation in order to continue counting with a bracha. Ki ha'gavna, in this case, to ikka kvod haTorah, on the one hand, there's the honor of Torah. Uchvod hatzibur, and the honor of the community. Efshar lismach bazeh, maybe you can rely on it. And therefore, an exception to the rule is the rabbi of the shul. Now, you may think that this is somewhat self-serving. The cynics amongst us might think, well, that's very convenient. The rabbi said that nobody's allowed to continue counting with a bracha if they missed out a whole day or night, apart from us. Why? Because, you know, we represent the community, and it would be humiliating if we had to admit that we didn't count. But what I want us to understand is the technical halachic background, foundation to this concept. It's not just a self-serving decision to make rabbis the exception to the rule. It is based on the halachic background. Because if you say that whenever there is a significant concern, it tips the balance in the weight of the majority halachic opinion, then one such concern can be a safek, did I count or not? And that tips the balance. Another concern could be kvod habriut, it could be kvod haTorah, it could be human dignity or the honor of Torah, where we will then follow the majority halachic opinion. It's not a wrong opinion, it is the majority opinion, and it is the consensus opinion which we rely on under certain circumstances. For example, the rabbi of the shul. I recall one year when my father forgot one night and he stopped counting in shul. And I said to him, but wait a second, you taught me that the rabbi of the shul can continue counting with a bracha. And he says, it's okay, they can also know that I'm human. That is all right. That's okay. And that was Rav Amital's opinion as well. Rav Amital was of the view that it's kvod haTorah, that people know that their rabbi is human. And if the rabbi is able to say, you know what, I forgot this year, or I forgot one night, Rav Amital believed that that itself is an expression of kvod haTorah, that rabbis don't have to be perfect or angels, they should just try their best. Now, Rav Rimon himself believes that this doesn't only apply to rabbis, and much of what I've brought you today is based on a book by Rav Rimon, and this is the final thing we will look at today. And this is perhaps also a very relevant question. Rav Rimon says, this is on one of the footnotes of the pages of his book on Birkat HaIlanot and Sfirat Omer, Mistaber sheyesh makom lehakel gam legabei shaliach hatzibur. Rav Rimon says that the chazan in shul, you can also be lenient for the chazan in shul. Shiachol levarech b'kol afem hifsid sfirat echad min hayamim, who can make the bracha out loud even if you've missed out on one of the days. Mitzad kvod habriot, because of the human dignity involved. So let's picture the scene. You've got somebody who's got a chiyuv, they've got a yard site, and they need to lead the community in prayer. However, they're out of the game for Sfirat Omer of counting with a bracha, and they feel just humiliated and embarrassed that they're going to have to stand up there and everyone will know that they've missed a night or they're not still in there in the game. So in that case as well, you don't have to be a rabbi. Normal people also can suffer humiliation and embarrassment, and that is also a reason to tip the balance. And so Rav Rimon was of the opinion as well that if you're the shaliach tzibur, the person davening from the Amud, then in such a situation as well, you certainly can count with a bracha, because we're tipping it in the favor of the majority halachic opinion. I've only noticed now that there are some comments that should be made during the shiur. Ashley, you can unmute yourself. Sorry, I didn't see these. You're fulfilling a mitzvah to follow Ida Rabbanan. Okay, so it's true that every time you fill a mitzvah which is rabbinic, you are fulfilling the Torah commandment to say, do what the rabbis tell you to do, and that's a discussion in and of itself. Ashley brought up the bar mitzvah question, which Ezra brought up. David Prince says embarrassment is midoraita, and therefore that would override it. It's not just a small thing to tip the balance, it's a very big thing. Does human dignity apply to all people? David, we have answered your question, and the answer is yes. All humans deserve human dignity. David Weisman wants to know, would the rabbi continue to count with a bracha if he went to another shul? And the answer would be no, unless that shul, when he's sitting there at the front of shul, says, visiting rabbi, could you please lead us with counting the Omer? Then maybe he can count with a bracha. But if he's just has the luxury of sitting in the normal seats in shul, then he can pay for that luxury by not making a bracha. And Ashley Tugendhaft asks, so it doesn't matter even if you skipped many, many nights then when you're a chazan, correct? Ashley, it does not matter. It doesn't matter if you skip one night or 20 or 30 nights. If you are the chazan, you have an independent mitzvah to fulfill tonight, according to the weight of halachic opinion. Normally, we don't rely on that halachic opinion and we rely on the bahag, but in such a situation, and we can follow that majority, and not even relying on a minority halachic opinion. In that situation, you are following a majority halachic opinion. There's a discussion I didn't bring here, which is a technical halachic question you can ask, which is, what if the halacha really is like Rambam? And what if it really is midoraita? Or let's say that, what if the halacha is really like the bahag? And what if you really cannot count if you've missed out the other nights? Then you have a situation whereby one person is making a bracha on behalf of other people who have a higher level of obligation. So it's all well and good that we're being nice and we're saying, yeah, you can pretend to be in the game, but can somebody who's out of the game of making a bracha cover somebody who's still in the game who needs to make a bracha lechatchila? That is a halachic discussion I did not bring today, and it's clear that Rav Vosner was of the opinion that such a person can. The other thing I didn't mention today was the suggestion of the Mishnah Brura, which is a good way out of things. Let's say you've forgotten one day to count with a bracha. If there is a member of your household, because we're not seeing anyone else nowadays, but if there's a member of your household who is still in the game counting with a bracha, then you can hear their bracha, say amen to their bracha, and therefore you are covered, shomer ke'oneh, with their bracha, and then you count without a bracha. That is a suggestion of the Mishnah Brura to get around the situation as well. Either way, if there's one thing everybody can take from this shiur is continue counting, count the Omer. If you're sure that you've definitely missed a day or not, if you're unsure if you've missed a day or not, keep counting the Omer with a bracha, without a bracha. There are lots of mitzvot for us still to perform, 6 weeks or more left of us fulfilling this mitzvah. I wish everybody a Chag Sameach, and our next shiur will be next week. Next Tuesday, there is there's a Yavne Lag BaOmer event to which the community is invited. If there's a clash and we decide not to overlap, maybe we'll have a small change to, not Lag BaOmer, sorry, Yom HaShoah. There's a Yavne Yom HaShoah event to which the community is invited. If there's a clash, we'll let you know. Either way, read your Mizrahi emails to know what's going on, and we'll let you know about all planning. Chag Sameach, everyone.
Chag Sameach, Shkoyach.